Interesting.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
Hanging in, hanging in. I don't believe we've met. I'm not easy.
Hi there. Yeah, my name's Jamie and I'm with Nginx. So I've been wanting to join in here more.
Uh,
And
uh,
yeah, finally coming in.
well, I'm not easy. I'm with Apple, and
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of work with Melissa from JFrog, doing a lot of stuff with her. So she's been trying to get me involved to, try to get the other side of the other side of the house, kind of the platform ops sort of story here.
Okay, okay, awesome, awesome. I'll give it another couple minutes, and then we go ahead and get started. And actually, if we just want to, you know, I'm open to an open conversation too. If you just want to talk about stuff in general and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to get there, if it's just the two of us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I gotta step away for one.
Hmm?
Oh, I just gotta step away.
Oh yeah,
My
yeah.
daughter is yelling for me from the other room. That we're in that fun part of summer where all the camps are over, but school hasn't started yet. So kind of scrambling for childcare some days.
How old is your daughter?
She's just turned 5, so she's just about to start kindergarten.
Awesome, awesome. That's a great age. That's a great age.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Uh, I have three, or I should say, I had three. They're all grown, so
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. Me and my wife both we both have 2 older brothers, so we're sticking with one though. So it's always interesting coming from big families and being like, what's it like to be an only kid?
Yes. Yeah. When you have one, there's a lot of, stuff you don't have to deal with. And especially that who's, why are you touching me and stuff like that? Or, yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, all right. All right. This is my first time doing this way. So let's see if I can share the agenda. Sorry, did that do the thing? Be able to. Oh, wow. It wants me to quit and reopen to be able to share. So I have to drop for a second to do this. Okay. All
No
right.
worries.
Okay. Going to work. Hey. That work? Can you see the agenda?
I can see your screen. Looks like I'm looking at your email right now, but
Oh, okay. Okay. So it is not sharing my agenda. Um, sharing. What is it sharing? Why is it sharing my desktop? Okay. Let's try that again. Uh, mm, share screen. How about that? Did that do it?
there we go. That looks like an agenda.
There we go. All right. All right. Okay, and I'll put the link to the agenda in the chat. And yeah, you can tell we don't use Zoom. Hmm. So just for the sake of the recording, I'm gonna add from the recap that oh, hello Fatih, how are you doing?
So for being late.
No,
No,
it's
other
fine.
meetings.
We're just getting
Yeah.
started. We are literally just getting started. I was having some technical difficulties. Okay, so so as I was saying, we just wanted to start with the updates, and I am still blocked, but we are actually moving forward on CD events projects, and that should actually get resolved forthwith. And I'll be able to contribute the things that are currently with the open source review board internally and share that. I'm expecting that to happen like any moment. So that's the good news from that side of it. The So that should free up the white paper. We need to also figure out other engagement materials with the story for that is going to be moving forward. Thank you, Damien, for doing that. And so the things that I have pending are the mission statements that I wrote for us to select and the white paper. Then we can focus on the roadmap and what we'd like to produce and other engagement materials. The reference architecture was, at least the beginning of that, was shared by Andrea last week. I have not had, I'm sorry, last meeting 2 weeks ago. I have not had much time to go through it. I just opened it up and kind of looked at it. I don't know if Melissa has looked at it as well. Also open from last week's meeting is the supply chain SIG. And we were supposed to reach out to them via email. Again, Melissa's out, and that's the update on that side. We need more people. I mean, that's the short of it. So increasing engagement to get people to come together and start talking about the topics, which is interoperability for the CDF is super crucial. And really, we need to start trying to figure out the pieces of how that's going to look and how it's going to work. My background is more, the engineering side of that and solving those problems. That's been my focus for internally at Apple for the past few weeks, and we're moving pretty strongly forward. As we're trying to solve like how interoperability works and looks, these are the questions that, of course, we're bringing back to this particular SIG, and this is why we formed a SIG to start to solve these problems. The challenges of interoperability from a CD events perspective and what the goal of that is supposed to be is what I'm hoping that we can discuss today, and how we fulfill that expectation for the messaging that we've been doing so far as saying this is interoperability as opposed to integration for the long-term success of CD events, to bring it beyond just metrics and visualization. The next step is really, beg some questions about what is the goal of like a DSL, or are we trying to build like a broker? So I am hoping from an engineering perspective that we can talk about those challenges. I've listed out some of the ones that we've run into so far, or at least as my team has been reviewing CD events and the expectations for how it works and the messaging. We just want to be sure, or I just want to be sure that as a SIG, we know which way we're going. We can start talking about how we want to build things and how we want to structure it. My focus in some of the white papers and writing was around this goal of interoperability. But as I look and go through CD events and try to make that work on the board, I am left with questions about how do we accomplish this, okay? So I guess the first to be able to add some depth to this, like how familiar are we with just the CD event spec as a group? Has everyone had an opportunity to kind of dive into it and look at it and kind of pick it apart a little bit, or are we kind of high level in general in the area? And I have no expectation for you, Fatih, to have dropped into it. How about
Yeah, I'm still rather high level with the CD events.
Okay.
I went to a bunch of talks at CDCon there in Vancouver. Haven't really had a chance to dig into the details, but yeah, they've been primarily coming for the interoperability. Seemed like from my conversations with Fatih and other folks, it seemed like this was the place where I might be able to be the most help.
Awesome. Well, that's exactly what we need, right? We definitely need folks who want to come in and help and dive in. The event structure, or the language of CD events from the eventing folks has CD events is very declarative. So you're dropping a lot of things into a bucket saying, hey, I did this, I did this, I did this. The issue with that is that for consumption, if a consumer is completely aware of what they're looking for and the service, and especially in smaller use cases, you can actually get interoperability because you have one service looking for events from another service, and then you move on down the chain. as you start to scale that out, you need coordination. You need, some way to be able to kind of separate securely one event system from the other event system. And that is the general challenge. And as we were going through that, because the system is not imperative, like I can't send a message and expect a response back from that message to another service, you're left with the challenge that most of the logic for that has to live in the messaging bus. While that's not necessarily a problem, it's just a design choice. The question becomes, if we set a goal for this group to say, okay, we want to have a DSL, then the DSL essentially becomes the service itself, the event bus, to be able to say, okay, this is how it works. And what I want to determine, or I'm hoping to determine through the SIG, or at least through conversation, is what is the goal of that delivery? What are we expecting? Are we expecting to go ahead and say, okay, we'll design the engineering for the event bus itself and create a new tool? There's several event buses that are available, like Captain is a great example of a really good event bus. But it isn't like service aware to the depth that we would need it to be. So are we saying, hey, let's go take on another project, engage with those guys and say, hey, can we get you to work around CD events and the things that happen? Like, what is the goal? And to kind of get a solid goal so that we, as we're communicating what we're going to do to get engagement, we're really clear with that messaging. Some of the other choices, of course, is to go sit down with the CD events team and say, hey, we need this spec to be a little bit more imperative, and to have some imperative ability around CD events so that we can have interactions in the messaging and actually carry forward the goal of interoperability. And that opens up things like value stream directly within the spec of CD events, as opposed to having to have a separate system run that. Is that too technical for the group itself at this point? That's really what I'm trying to determine, because I live in the design layer and trying to solve these problems at a very large scale. And I'd like to be able to do that here, if possible, for the group. And is that too much for the SIG is really the question that I am trying to ascertain at this point.
As you can guess, I have opinions.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping for.
I think, like, you already touched many of the things I am going to highlight. Like, so if you think about interoperability, the CD events or event-based approach is one way of, one potential, maybe viable way of addressing this. But since the SIG looks at interoperability, I think maybe we should work CD events and SIG events closely, but at the same time to, be open to other interested people who might want to contribute this. Maybe we can take a broader approach, which is what you, I think, plan to do with white paper as well. Like, why are we talking about interoperability? Are we only talking about CD events here? Then I should go somewhere else. Like, if someone comes, because some people have different ways to tackle this challenge. So again, this might relate to roadmap discussion we had as well. Like, if you can somehow, this interoperability, okay, it looks at different personas and looks at the interoperability as broader area to work on, and on the roadmap we can have more tactical things like, okay, this is a problem, like, okay, CD events and broader event-based approach addresses that aspect, but what about this DSL or visualization aspects or VSM aspects? Like, if you can slice these different things down, then people with those ideas, needs, or concerns, or solutions maybe could take part in conversations targeting those specific areas under interoperability. So we don't I don't want to use the word force, but we don't direct them to just one thing. CDMS is the way we are going to do this. So if we can somehow keep things a bit abstract and high level, but at the same time, if needed, we can dive into details. Okay, in this aspect, CDMS is our current focuses, but it doesn't mean that is the only way. It doesn't mean that is the only thing we focus on. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's kind of, because if we tell people this is the thing we are doing, then they will go to app delivery, they will go to OpenSF, they will go to somewhere else, even though we've been discussing this on a high level. So it's kind of, where is the balance boundary?
Yeah, I'm totally agree with you there, Fatih. It really seems like that thing where, maybe CD events is a, really, really good reference architecture. We have something that kind of shows like, here's a really advanced solution that uses these other pieces. But it's also very important that we also have but also you don't need it, right? It may be easier, it may make your life better, but I feel like a lot of the times with systems like this, when you look at this and you're like, oh, there's CD events and then there's this tool and that tool and that tool, a lot of times people get overwhelmed and kind of scared away. And I think, at least, my kind of thoughts of where this group would be really helpful is kind of showing the different options of being like, yeah, here's a super advanced solution, but also here's kind of like the, baby steps. Here's like the beginner one. Let's just get some automation in your system. And then you can kind of see, oh, okay, now that I have the baseline, now I can progress and I can go, okay, let's add a bit more complexity. And now maybe I have the understanding to better implement these more advanced scenarios. So you don't end up in one of those situations where, people end up with these kind of like cobbled together, overly complex solutions that then end up causing more trouble than they help. And then people go, what's this CD stuff? This is a waste of my time. Why did I ever do this? Instead of, starting at an easily digestible part and then progressing there into the more advanced solutions.
Okay.
Yeah, and also this would help, what you said, Damien, they start with some kind of blueprint, and that could be our reference architecture without CD ones. Let's just say that. And then as they progress through their transformation, or as they embrace continuous delivery, they will inherently hit these things, they will try to bring in new technology, either open source or, commercial. They will see these problems and they may attempt to solve them, and they solve them, but they will continue, they will need to keep that up to date since open source moves fast. And then that could be next step to take for those people. And then they can, okay, we have this problem as well. Let's look at CDMS. So it's kind of, because if people are not aware of the problem, it won't work. It doesn't matter how much we talk about advanced things. Tadisi, you have been living in this and you face this too many times. It feels like natural thing to discuss, but when you talk to some others, they're like, they don't even know what problem you are talking about.
Yes.
Okay, I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, if you try to show people this amazingly complex problem you're solving, and they go, that's great, but I've never seen that problem before. This isn't for me, right? That sort of thing. Because I feel like a lot of times that's where you get when you're, when you got somebody who's green and looking at some of these solutions, and it just, again, it gets overwhelming, and they're like, well, I'm not to that scale. I don't need this. And it's like, no, you want to do it now. So as you scale up, you're not trying to implement this in your super complex environment. It's like automation in general, right? It takes longer to automate it the first time than doing it by hand, but now you don't have to do it by hand every other time, and you have a baseline to build off of.
Okay, and if I'm paraphrasing any of this wrong, please let me know. So okay, that's actually a great point about progression and being able to show the steps in that and why that's important. The use cases of visualization and metrics, it actually, solves that problem really, really well. It is just the more complex things that become a challenge. It also sounds like in this discussion that we're, saying like, hey, let's just focus there first and take people through like, okay, this is the benefits of visualization early in the process, and not, and push out the goal of trying to make a system where everything is just basically drag and drop because it's being built towards interoperability. And that helps in the sense that it kind of shrinks the need to have a goal of this year saying, all right, we want to dive into a DSL. Because a DSL is a very specific thing in my mind, where we're saying, okay, we're going to solve the problem of getting these systems to communicate and work together. And then we still have time to kind of experiment as they're building out the events and see what that would look like and bring the problems back to the CD events group and have that discussion with them and say, hey, these are the challenges of what you're building. And as we try to use it, this is what we see. And when we get some clear ideas of how that should work, then go back and try to do the DSL. Are we okay with like pushing that out another? I mean, it might be a year if that's the case. Are we okay with that? Fatih, I'm glad you're here actually, because that.
So did you ask something? I was
Yeah, I was asking
a
if
message.
do we feel like, just in the flavor of this conversation, and if our goal is to start, so when I sat down with Melissa a couple of months ago, we were talking about this, we had this goal of making a DSL within a year, or starting the process of designing a DSL within a year, which from an engineering perspective, at least, it's not a lot of time. So which is why I'm bringing up this topic now, because if we are already 2 months into what we had as that year, that doesn't leave a lot of time. So if we're saying, hey, let's change the focus and not try to deliver a DSL or set the plan for a DSL now, and focus on visualization and metrics and trying to solve some of the problems that we see for having this really deep, complex interoperability model, and keep working with the CD events team to highlight those areas. So we can still work on the discovery process and work on, how would a DSL look, but not try to jump directly into it by kicking down a lot of doors and saying, hey, we need to go and solve these problems immediately.
No, I think like, again, just I want to make sure like what I try to say is like, I'm not saying we shouldn't discuss the details.
Yeah.
The thing is like, as it is in like any other community, like if you can somehow, DSL is one thing, visualization is another thing. If we can somehow come up with, a high level roadmap or something, and if like people show interest in DSL, that work can proceed, because if there is nobody talking about like, how to say, visualization, for example, nobody will be working on it.
Yep.
So we can change the order of things. Like I'm not saying like we shouldn't look at DSL or we shouldn't dive into details, but what I am trying to say, if you can put few topics in roadmap which ties back into the interoperability white paper and broader vision, and see who shows up. And if like, that's how events started.
Mm-hmm.
When we started with special interest group interoperability, we were talking about lots of different things like pipeline standardization, visualization, events, and so on. And few of those people show interest in events and they start working with it. And the pipeline standardization, no one showed any interest. That work didn't proceed. And that I'm trying to say is like, we can take a similar approach. We can start with like broader problem description and then different areas we have been talking about. And if DSL appears to be the one with most contributors, then we can work on it. Like, instead of like, let's say someone random joins next week, that person shouldn't think, oh, we are only talking about DSL or we are only talking about events. We should give as much information to those people in crisp and short way, and then that person can make up their mind and say, oh, I can contribute this on this level because we are not there yet. And if that person is interested in DSL, can join the effort. Why I'm saying this, because last week someone sent a message on Twitter or post or X platform asking about GitOps primitives and event standardization, and totally random person, which I never saw anywhere within CDF or elsewhere, linked CD events there. So there are people out there who are looking at what is happening. And if you can put these things like, what are the topics that could be discussed under interoperability, then those people could find ways to join the conversation. So instead of us showing them to a certain thing, we can keep the problem a bit broader, and based on the interest from the people who take part in this conversation, then we can focus on individual areas because we can't solve all the problems. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yes. And yeah, and I guess if I was making it sound like we are, you know, dropping one thing to do another, that wasn't my intent. What I'm saying is let's slow down and, you know, give us some room to experiment and see how this process can actually work before we commit to saying that we're going to build a DSL, right? And so I would, because some of the work that I'm doing is progressing down that channel very, very quickly, because that's the promise I want to fulfill. You know, I am bringing up these problems, and then, you know, I have somebody on my staff who's actually in the CD of SIG, you know, who is taking those problems back to the meetings, but then we're also doing things internally, and there's, you know, a bunch of different groups now that are all saying, yes, this sounds awesome, let's do it. And then we're sitting down and go, okay, but how do we make it do this other piece, or how do we make it do this other thing that from reading just the white papers and the talks and seeing the slides, they're like, oh, it says it does it. How do we get to there? And I agree with you that we've got to basically say, hey, these are the things that it can do. Let's have conversations and find the places where people want to glean onto that and move it forward, especially for things like visualization, because there isn't a tool or something that will take the events and do the visualization. And, you know, we can describe that and start there. And it's the same thing with the metrics, right? Where there is no discussion around, hey, this is how to get the metrics out of it. This is how we thought about it in terms of if you wanted to do deep business analysis and, you know, any value stream kind of, I don't want to say, you know, basic value streaming. How's that? Would be a way to do that. I almost said poor man's value stream. So I agree with you. I think that's a great approach. And like I said, my concern was that we were trying to set a goal to say, this is when we're going to have a DSL, and do that specifically for the roadmap. And I think that if we take that step back, that kind of changes that conversation over the next year. It's more like, let's build conversations around each track to see what tools or what information we can make available and create that interest, and then, you know, take action as we gain the interest, as opposed to saying we're going to have a thing on this date. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that is the approach we took with the original roadmap, like near term, later and future kind of thing. Like, again, let's say the examples are really great, like DSL, visualization metrics. Let's assume we identified these three as the topics we will focus. DSL could become the near term thing, and it could be like, okay, next year we want to have DSL, and then visualization could be after that, and so on. That could attract others, because, like, again, CD events, I think in that repo there is an issue around visualization, and if people see those things, they join the effort because they might have similar ideas and they might have thoughts. We need to make these things visible. That's what I am trying to say. Essentially, I'm not disagreeing with you that you see, like, if you have a target, like if you want to see this happen, obviously, like, we have contributor already, you know. But if have a topic there, nobody shown interest, then we can at least make that visible, so we might attract people who want to contribute to that discussion.
Yes. Okay.
I warned you, I have opinions.
No, this is perfect, right? Because I don't want to say that I'm beginning, because there are, like I said, there's things happening in my world internally. And I am on the engineering side, right? I build things. And so when you're in that space and you're in those meetings with a lot of other smart people going, okay, well, how are you going to do a thing? And they said they can do, that's what the focus is. That's what the stresses are. And you're trying to get that and solve those problems. But it might not be the community's problem. And that's the other side of this engagement, is understanding where the community is in this process and how we can create that feedback loop and say, okay, community, I see this thing you're doing. It's solving these immediate problems. How does that work out long term, right? And so what I hear you saying is, let's focus on the places where people might want to discuss by opening up all of the things and saying, okay, this is how you can accomplish these steps. And we have not put out anything that says, for using CD events to do visualization, this is what you need to do. And so that's a great starting point, and not jumping all the way to the end and saying, okay, this is the interoperability DSL that's going to connect Tectron and Spinnaker and Jenkins together seamlessly. And then when the next CI system comes out, you can just drop in a new one because it's all interoperable, right? And so instead of jumping to the end of the train, let's just start at the beginning, create the interest, and then step people to the next thing as they are showing that interest. That's what I'm hearing you say. And when you start talking about near term, midterm, far term, that's what I hear. Like, okay, let's create that interest, being able to show things that we can actually accomplish quickly, and people can take action on, use, and then give us feedback, and then go on to the next step, right? Is that?
And I put a link to Zoom chat.dc. This, like, I learned this from someone else. Like, I should give credit. Like, especially in community, like I situations as well. Like, someone opened up a backlog and said, like, we will work through this backlog. And I was like, I'm not working for your company. You can't dictate what I want to do and when I want to do that. So if you can have a bit more flexibility, and if you look at that diagram I put on Zoom, it kind of is flexible enough, but at the same time, it puts some expectations on the community. Like, we can say, these are 3 things. Let's focus on DSL as the current thing, because we have people who want to contribute that thing. We have actual work we can do right now. And visualization, we depend on CDVANs, for example, or we don't have anybody to do that, but we think it is important. We can put it into near term with a bit flexibility. And these things can move between different stages. Like, we have like 5 people joining for metrics. Let's prioritize that, because we have those people who want to contribute it, and that work could also start in parallel. So that's kind of, have some kind of structure, visibility, but at the same time, have some flexibility based on the community interest.
Okay.
Again, this I learned from someone else, and it worked for the communities I was involved in, but we can take a different approach as well. Just, as an example, we can look at.
All right. Sorry, I want to get the link on there. Okay.
I'm totally agree. I think it's a lot with that same, like, as we're trying to draw people in, if somebody stumbles across it or goes, I'd want to be a part of this, and they see us working on this only one thing, and it's very in depth and very like, it would be awesome to have this drop in interoperability where you just go, I want to use X, and it just all plugs in together. But I feel like a lot of people who maybe are newer to these sort of things and want to participate and want to give their their input, they see it there and will maybe just go, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, these people are way ahead of me. I'm not going to open my mouth. I don't want to look dumb, right? So having that wide range of things, and being like, hey, here's some, it's kind of like getting people started on any open source project, right? It's like, hey, here's the easy things to do. Here's some bugs that you can knock out, kind of get a good understanding, contribute something, feel like you're part of the community, and not get scared away because everybody's, going, oh, don't ask questions. You're just taking our time, right? It's trying to draw people into make them want to contribute and want to participate.
Okay, that's a great call out. You contribute immediately. I like that a lot. How to contribute immediately. A sense of inclusion. Is that a good way of saying that? How to wait, did I do inclusion? Project space, you know, and basically what can I do to does that make sense? Am I catching? Is that okay? All right. All right. No, I like that because okay. So that's near term. And what becomes then the midterm for?
Or
do
isn't
we-
DSL near term? That is, because you mentioned you talk with me. Isn't DSL near term? Because you have interest in that and you talk with Dadisi, so it can be near term.
Well,
Or no.
yeah, I think that's the challenge that I was talking about. Like if we are trying to do the DSL near term, there's a lot of problems to overcome to be able to do that. And what I am recommending, you know, especially based on this feedback, is that yes, we continue to do the work to do interoperability, and the folks who are interested in that and building that and discovering what those blockers are, they're still going to do that, but the delivery of the item is not something that we're focused on, right? We're focused on the discovery of the challenges to create the DSL. And, you know, and then we can have further conversations in the community about, hey, we took your concept, we're trying to make a thing out of it. And I know like Fidelity's also like going through this too, and say, you know, this is what the challenges are. Like if it did these extra things, we can make it do X, or if we standardize here, we can make it do this other portion of it. Because the challenge is that there are no real standards for what the minimum is that you need for these points of communication, right? And then we also would have to go back and say, okay, if you're going to do this communication within this standard, this becomes mandatory. And a lot of the ways that we're talking about CD events in the SIG is like everything's optional, right? Do it to fit your need. But we're not talking about the common things that always have to be there. And if you're going to go with more of a messaging or imperative format, then these things have to be there and it's required. And then we can go back even to the vendors who and say, hey, look, if you're going to use CD events and you're doing this, you always need to have these fields at a minimum so that we can use it to trigger other systems or other services and keep that context within the chain of events. Because part of the challenge is that you want to be able to do this from commit to deploy. And so sometimes, especially and again, I apologize because being at Apple, everything for me is enterprise scale at a ridiculous enterprise scale. And so if I do a commit for one org, but that has to do something in another org when it's deployed, I have to be able to coordinate all of these people with that. And so those are the problems that I'm seeing and trying to solve. And so when I'm with teams and we're doing this and we're whiteboarding it and we're having discussions, I am way at the other end of this. And what I'm hearing is like, no, not everybody's over there, dude. Just calm down. I get that you've got a thing to do. But start with the things that are over here that'll draw in more people, get that interest, give them some wins, right? And let them feel a part of the community, because that is something where I'm like, all right, yeah, let's make this thing happen. This is, but yeah, start with visualization, give people the tools to do the visualization, and then get feedback and say, okay, was that valuable? What do you need in that space to keep the project going and keep interoperability, the interest in the interoperability and the problems that we can solve in interoperability, not just jumping to the end. But I'm going to continue to do that work. The people who are doing that work will continue to do that work and can bring back that information and keep the feedback, but having the goal of delivering a thing that solves that problem will happen more organically if we're having discussions and when we all identify the point that says, okay, this is what we need to do as a communication practice to make this work. And this works for all of the different individual companies and or participants. And because we've taken baby steps to bring people in with the metrics and the basic value stream, then we have more community around that and we can communicate it in that fashion. At least that's what I'm getting from the feedback that I've gotten from this meeting so far. And the light that I needed to kind of like, I'm not going to say panic, but like when you're in there and you're having the discussions and like, no, this is going to work. I believe in this. And, so this makes a lot more sense than the stuff that I was literally up last night going, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? So yeah. So does that explain, like, we're not giving up on the DSL, but we're trying to do things that will engage more people and bring them forward. Okay. And
I think that kind of discovery aspect is a great way for that same like sense of inclusion. How can I contribute? Right. It's like, it's an easy way to contribute. Like, come tell us what problems you have, right? Like, what are the issues you've run into? What's the bar? Like, especially if you have somebody even who maybe hasn't actually implemented this sort of thing. It's like, why didn't you? You probably looked at it. What was the, like a lot of the times, like we talk about, like, what was it that made you rage quit, right? What was that thing where you're just like, you know what, it's not worth my time, throwing it out the window, I'm moving on to something else, or, something more important. And gathering that information is great because, like you said, the problems you have at Apple are a lot different than the problems somebody has at their startup, right? Or the problems somebody has when they're, just starting down this road of wanting to do this sort of thing. And I know, I've always seen, when you get people starting to talk about, what they've tried and what they've done, and even what they failed at, you can start getting a lot more information out of people. And it's, and especially in a context of not just complaining, but looking to kind of put something together so that you can move it in a better direction.
I like that.
Because there's so much of this where, I know we're all looking for that, silver bullet right there. But in the whole technology world, there is no right answer. There's the right answer for, your situation, what you're trying to do. And that might be the right answer today. And it's not the right answer tomorrow. Right. So I always like to, really make that clear where it's like, hey, it's not that you don't know what you're doing. It's that this stuff's tough. And we're trying to do what we can to make it a little bit simpler and make it easier for this stuff to work and not have to re-architect every time you make a change.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Okay. And I think there are, this has been super useful for me. So thank you for showing up, because it's even in the things that I have written and done, I was at the other end of this discussion, not at the beginning. And the discovery portion of that, like finding out what people's issues are, outside of my own use cases, I really wasn't even, I don't want to say I wasn't thinking about it, because I knew people had problems and, that would hopefully all come out in the community, but how to engage people where they are is the mistake that I'm literally been making in this process, is that I have to meet them with the empathy to be, okay, where are you at now? And then, use that as a part of the discovery process, because we'll figure out more about what's happening with everyone. So thank you so much. Okay. So for the midterm, sorry to be like all over the place with my agenda. Okay, so discover. We'll discover actionable issues. This almost sounds like how to engage with the open SSF, like, do the survey, find the problems. Now they're like, now we're going to fix the problems, right? Okay, awesome. All right, so this can wait.
Like just dreaming out loud based on that, like current near-term future.
Mhm.
Like again, dreaming, this has been my dream since 2016, 17. Compliance, like it could be a future item, like we don't even talk about it right now, but this could pave the way for compliance. Okay, I'm relating different open source technologies and some commercial tools, but do they comply with CDMAs, for example?
Yeah.
That could be a
Okay.
really future target, you know. It's like I want to make my tool selections based on what has been developed. Will they work with these tools, or are they part of this CDMAS ecosystem, for example?
Yeah.
And one way to learn about that is having some kind of compliance program in place, which can, you know, help users making their technology selections. So again, this will not happen next year. It will take ages because like it's been 7 years already, so it will go a few more years. So again, just, you know, where we can push this thing in future.
Okay. So I'm gonna put interoperability here for now. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. So this kind of reshapes some of the things that well, I, I haven't actually read once I gave my white papers and stuff to the OSRB, I haven't really gone back and touched them again. So I'm actually going to look at that today and kind of make sure that I give more focus to the starting points. Because I've been super obsessed ever since I met you, Fatih, last year with the aspect of interoperability. And that's like, I go to sleep thinking about that. I wake up thinking about it. But yeah, Damien, I'm so glad you showed up today, because that would have been like, I would still been off in that space. Yeah. So I'm super happy right now. And I do this thing where I get recharged from talking to Fatih, but I think, Damien, you're going to be on that list now. So yeah, definitely. Please come back, man, because that was super useful
Yeah,
and helpful.
I'm glad I can help out, and I'm hopefully I can bring that other kind of viewpoint here. But yeah, I'm planning on participating as much as I can when my schedule allows it. So
Okay.
yeah, I'll be back.
Okay. Essentially, this is what I wanted to cover today, or make sure it got covered today. Are there any specific issues that actually, I hope, you know, are there any specific issues that you guys wanted to talk about, or things that you're concerned with, or things that you want to know about to this point? And apologies for not leaving more time to have this open discussion. All right, cool.
I enjoyed this a lot. Thanks, Ladisi.
No,
Was good. I
yeah,
use
no, thank you both.
more of my brain, you know.
No, I love having things I can take action on, and this was super awesome, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. Okay.
Awesome.
Cheers, folks.
Great to meet you. See y'all.
Thank you.